NBA fans, you give your all to your favorite team. You spend your time talking about them. You follow them on social media, pay for tickets, merchandise, TV packages, all to stay in the know for your favorite squad. And what do they reward your loyalty with? Mid. What's up, guys? It's Colin from Next Man Up, and today I want to talk about the single worst decision your NBA team can make, and that's staying in the middle ground. Now, you may be asking, what exactly is the middle ground? So the middle ground isn't exactly a definition that's defined anywhere in a book, but I consider the NBA's middle ground to be teams that aren't trying to compete, but also aren't trying to tank. With that being said, your team isn't necessarily in the middle ground if they get knocked out in the playoffs or if they didn't get the number one pick or anything like that. As long as they're trying to do one or the other, you have some sort of direction. Teams that choose to stay in the middle ground are wasting time playing players who maybe are around an all-star level, but ultimately can't lead them to a championship. They waste money on expensive role players in the offseason just to create a team that still hangs under championship level. They don't make huge trades to chase a finals run. They don't trade their assets to brighten their future. Instead, they choose to stay complacent. And for the fans of these teams, I honestly feel really bad for you. In all honesty, what's the point of watching a team that has no plans to win anything of significance, but also has no shot of drafting from the best pool of talent that the league has to offer? My other stipulation for a team I consider to be in the middle ground is that they can't be developing a young superstar. Every team has young talent, don't get me wrong, but if you're trying to develop a player who could be fighting for an all-NBA first team in just a couple years, I understand your direction might be kinda undefined, so I'm going to cut you some slack. So teams like the Pelicans or the Hornets, who have young stars that we just haven't seen pan out yet, those two will get a pass. Now, with all that being said, which teams do I have in that middle ground level? Let's talk about it. I've brought it down to two teams. Both of these teams aren't in the championship race. They're not looking like they'll be anywhere close to the number one pick, and I think they perfectly represent what I consider the middle ground of the NBA. These two teams are the Chicago Bulls and the Toronto Raptors. And this comes with no intended disrespect to fans of the Bulls or the Raptors. I would argue that I actually have a lot of respect for you all. Both of your teams have histories of winning, and they aren't too far off from being a contender or a rebuilder. But right now, you're all in a tough spot. I'll start with the Bulls. Before 2016-ish, I think it would be fair to say Chicago was definitely trying to compete. Obviously, they had that team in 2011 that made the Eastern Conference, headlined by Derrick Rose. But things have become much more mid since. In 2016, the team won 42 games, got placed outside of the playoffs, and as a 9th seed in the East, they were left to select at number 16 in that year's draft, taking the legend, Denzel Valentine.
Less than a minute to go.
No.
Oh my goodness, Valentine!
No.
Whoa,
No.
That is not the...
Chicago would then move on from Derrick Rose, but then still opt to run a very similar lineup the next season, headlined by Jimmy Butler. This team would win 41 games to end up in the 8th seed in the East, where they would be defeated by the Boston Celtics in the first round. In 2018, the Bulls looked to finally commit to the tank when they made the infamous trade that sent Jimmy Butler to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Unfortunately, they would drop down to the 7th pick that year and take Wendell Carter Jr. The next season looked very similar, and they picked up Kobe White at the 7th pick once again in 2019. In 2020, they looked to tank even harder and develop Zach LaVine into a superstar player. They ended up with the 4th pick that season and selected Patrick Williams out of Florida State. It looked like the Bulls were on the right path to tank, but a mix of unlucky draft lotteries and terrible draft selections made the rebuild take longer than they had expected. Instead of continuing to ride out the rebuild, the Bulls elected to trade the 3rd-year Wendell Carter Jr. at the deadline to bring in Nikola Vucevic. This trade alone has set Chicago into the middle ground for the foreseeable future. Not only did Chicago give up Carter Jr., who is debatably the better player, they also gave up 2 of their first-round picks, who became Franz Wagner and Jet Howard. Both of these players better than anyone Chicago has selected recently. The post-trade deadline Bulls finished the season 31-41 that year, and were back into the middle of the pack. And the Bulls made it even worse the following offseason when they brought in DeMar DeRozan and Lonzo Ball. Don't get me wrong, I like the idea of bringing in an all-star level forward and a young guard to gel with LaVine and Vucevic, but even with them all playing at a high level, there were too many questions for this team to work. This Bulls team didn't have the star power or continuity to be a real threat over in the East, and that showed when they finished as the 6th seed and got bounced early in the first round to the Bucks. Looking at the current roster in place, the team is still not built to compete for a ring. They just came off a season where they finished as a 10th seed, and they passed up on picking early in strong draft classes back in 21 and 23 just for that Vucevic trade. And Vucevic is playing a peg below the NBA's better centers right now. You can blame the injuries of Lonzo Ball or the coaching of Billy Donovan, but overall, the Bulls are in the ultimate middle ground right now, and you can tell by talking to their fans. The Bulls need to commit to a tank or commit to a run. Holding on and wasting valuable time in LaVine's career and underutilizing the last years of DeRozan do nothing for this team. You need to find some way to maximize the value of those guys, whether it's to go up or down. Bulls fans, I'm really sorry. I don't think it's anyone's fault on the team or necessarily in the coaching staff either, but the roster presented just doesn't swing me either way. The Bulls need to make decisions because they can't afford to waste even more time in the middle ground. Now, let's talk about the Raptors. Obviously, the Raptors just won a championship in 2019. They competed in the bubble, and they were a team trying to compete for years before that with Lowry and DeMar on their squad. But for the moment, it seems like they're almost gridlocked into that middle ground. In 2021, 2 years into the post-Kawhi era, the Raptors would go 27-45, a little bit under expectations for sure. And with good luck in the lottery, they were able to take Scottie Barnes with the 4th pick in that year's draft. Don't get me wrong, I really like Scottie Barnes. I think Scottie Barnes is becoming incredibly underrated by the average NBA fan, and I'm completely bought into him being one of the better young players in basketball going forward. But based on his play style and the position he plays, he's not going to be a guy who will lead the league in scoring or single-handedly bring a team to the finals one day. So the Raptors just simply can't build a team around him as such. In Scottie's rookie year, 2021, the Raptors ran a very similar lineup to the year before. They ended that season with 48 wins and a first-round exit. Then this past season, they went 41-41. They've made moves in this time, but a lot of them contradicted each other. Back in 2022, they traded their first-round pick for Thaddeus Young, but they were willing to sign and trade Lowry for a return of Precious Achiuwa and Goran Dragic. Looking at these moves, would you say they're trying to tank or compete? Because I can't tell. And this current lineup begs the same question. You decide to let Fred VanVleet walk in free agency. You're out on the Dame trade, but you're still keeping around Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby, who will keep the team out of tanking range. With that being said, this team isn't built to compete. They're not bad enough to tank, and I think the Raptors fans should be asking questions of what the team plans to do going forward. The Kawhi Leonard magic is starting to lose its shine, and the Raptors have to start making decisions. You don't have to make a super team necessarily in order to try to compete. I mean, just look at the Knicks. The Knicks aren't the best team in the league or anything, but they have players who are all on the same timeline. They're invested on getting guys that work well with each other, and they got free agents this offseason who are ready to play now. They might not win the finals, maybe they don't even come close, but they're showing they're willing to commit to competing, and it's making their fans a whole lot happier compared to when they were a team that was stuck in the middle just a couple years ago. If you're a fan of the Bulls or the Raptors, or maybe another team that you consider to be in the middle ground, I'm sorry, but there's still time. Both of these teams could make a couple moves and be straight in one direction, so keep holding out. That's all the time I've got. I have to ask a question though. Do you believe in the middle ground? And if so, what are some other teams you think are in it? And for the Bulls and Raptors fans watching this video, let me know, what direction do you think they should go in the league right now? They have a lot of options. Should they tank or compete? Let me know in the comments. We always appreciate the love on the channel, and watch out for some new videos soon. I heard someone you might not expect will be putting up some MVP numbers in basketball this year, so stay tuned for that. All love as always, and remember, keep sticking with the next man up. Peace out.